Well, hey, welcome to the very first episode of The Parent Path, a parenting podcast designed for the parents of X Church and parents beyond just the community of X Church. So if you happen to stumble upon this podcast and you are not currently a part of the X Church community, I first want to say welcome, and I'd love to just introduce myself to you. My name is Jesse. I currently have the great privilege of being the next gen pastor at X Church, which basically just means that I get to be involved in all things kids and youth. And within that realm, I really love learning and talking about parenting. And that is what this podcast is all about. But on top of just being the next gen pastor, I also have the great privilege of being husband to my wife, Sarah. We've been together for 9 years, coming up on the big 10-year anniversary. We're excited about that. And we have two incredible children, Milo and Cooper. And just in this first episode of The Parent Path, I kind of want to explain to you, one, just the reason why it's called The Parent Path, and also explain kind of my heart and goal for this podcast as we begin. First and foremost, if you are a part of the X Church community, hopefully you know our mission at X Church is helping people get on the path to God. We really believe that faith is not a destination that we arrive at, but rather it's a journey. It's a path that we walk down throughout our entire life. I actually believe parenting is the same thing. We don't just arrive at being great parents the second our children are born, but it is a journey that we are progressing down as our children age. And so kind of the goal of this podcast is to live in the intersection between faith and parenting, because I would say that being a parent is already a pretty challenging task. But then when you add being a Christ follower who is also a parent, and then adding the maybe extra pressure we feel sometimes to not only just raise, a strong, healthy human being, but also instill in them a foundation of faith, that's a really challenging thing. And so this podcast endeavors to kind of help all of us get better at doing just that. These episodes will come out monthly on the first Monday of the month. And my goal is to provide some helpful tips, some insight, and some encouragement that are going to help all of us on our parenting journey. And so some topics I'm planning on covering are things like discipline, technology, nurturing the mental health of your children, family devotionals, and more. And so I'd love to just say right now, if there is a topic you would love to hear discussed on this podcast, I would love for you to send me an email. You can email me anytime with your thoughts or ideas or anything at jesse.mccoy@thex.church. And I want to say right off the top, I'm not an expert in any of these topics we're going to discuss, but thankfully there are a ton of experts out there in all different kind of fields, and they have all written books. And so I know the reality of being a parent is there are probably a list of books that you have been wanting to read about how to become a better parent or how to, instill certain values into your kids, but you just haven't gotten around to them. So my goal is to kind of distill some of the information that the experts have put out there and speak from their expertise and combine it with my experience as being a parent myself. And so I'm really hoping that this is going to be helpful to you, and we're going to have some fun along the journey. And here's my promise to you. These episodes will be short and to the point, because as I just said, I know the reality of being a parent, and you don't have 3 hours to listen to me ramble on all my opinions on stuff. So these will be quick to the point. I'll get you the information, and then I will release you to start applying it into your family life. And so in this first episode, I want to kick it off with a very simple question. Who is the primary influence over your child's faith? Maybe I'll say that. Who or what is the primary influence of your child's faith? And I could imagine maybe one of the first answers that may come to mind is the church. You think of, the people that build my children's faith, that's the church. Maybe you even think of me or their XKIDS servant leader, the person that is in their classroom when you drop them off. Or maybe you've got kids that are a little bit older and, the influence of friends is becoming more and more relevant in their life. And I think all those answers are fantastic. But I want you to know mom, dad, or maybe somebody who has stepped into the role of a parent. Maybe you're a grandparent that has stepped in to fill a gap, or you're a step parent, or you're an adoptive parent. You are the greatest influence in your child's life. I'll say that again. You. Not the cool social media influencer, not the YouTuber that they love, not their friends. You are the greatest influence in your child's life. Or I'll say it this way maybe. You have, more than anyone else, you have the greatest potential for influence in your child's life in all areas, but especially when it comes to their faith. And there are three really major reasons for that. Number one is just your relationship to them. The fact that you are their parent automatically puts you 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Whether or not it always feels like that, because especially as our kids get older and they stop kind of thinking we're the coolest thing around and we start to become lame or boring or we don't know what's cool anymore, it starts to feel like they don't really care about what we think, but I promise they do. So first and foremost, your relationship, and then you combine that with just your proximity and the time you spend with them. They spend a whole lot of time with you and around you, observing you and learning from you and catching kind of your behaviors and your thoughts and your kind of ideas about how life is. They catch all of that from you. So you combined all three of those, your relationship, the proximity, and the time you spend with them, and you have the greatest potential for influence in your child's life. Now, let me ask you a second question. When I say that, when I say you are the number one influence in your child's life, what emotions come up in you? And for me, I'll answer that question. There are two major kind of feelings that arise in me. The first one is actually a great sense of peace. You probably are like me, and as my kids get older and older and they kind of step more into the internet space and friends become more and more important, I will sometimes worry about what all those other voices are saying to, or what those voices are teaching my child. Of course, we obviously try to limit the number of negative influences as much as possible, but still the reality is we're not going to catch all of them. And so as they grow, I maybe at times have a fear of, man, there are so many voices that are fighting not just for the attention of adults, but for the attention of children. And not all of those influences are positive, or I would say maybe not all those influences are ones that I want my children to gravitate to. But hearing that I have the greatest potential for influence in my child's life actually gives me a sense of peace that, yes, there are negative influences that I should be aware of, but those voices will never be stronger than mine. Gives me a real sense of peace. While at the same time, hearing that I have the primary responsibility to instill or to develop or build a foundation of faith in my child's life also feels like a ton of pressure. And even for me, and I serve as a pastor, and my realm is in the realm of kids and teenagers, I will feel unqualified to do that for my children. I ask the questions, how do I talk about faith with a 3-year-old? How do I talk about faith in a way that makes sense to them? How do I help them understand not just the importance, but the need for faith in their life? Which scriptures do I try to teach them? Where do I even start? How do I teach them about some of the stuff from the Old Testament that's difficult for me to understand? What spiritual habits or just spiritual things should I try and instill at them? And then what age do I try to instill those things in? I imagine that you have maybe had some of these questions as well. I want to say all these feelings of maybe feeling a little bit overwhelmed or unqualified to teach our kids about the things of God are completely normal. And we are among good company, because I would argue that every parent ever has at least gone through seasons of feeling all these things. But I have some good news for you. Because what I think can calm some of these feelings of concern or feeling unqualified is to remember that while we are, as parents, the greatest influence, or we have the potential for the greatest influence in the life of our children, we are not the only influences that our child needs. Again, especially when it comes to their faith. This is the beauty of being a part of a church community. And I'm biased, but I would say especially being a part of a beautiful community like X Church, because not only does the church provide other voices that will echo the things of God that we are all trying to instill in them, but also the church can provide a framework to develop your child's faith. And what I mean by that is that we as the church have a seemingly never-ending supply of content and materials and specifically curated curriculum that is intentionally designed to develop a child's faith all throughout their development. This is why I would say when it comes to building a foundation of faith in the life of a child, we build best when we build together, the family, parents, and the church. We build best when we build together, when the influence of the home and the love that comes from a parent and then the strategy of the church are combined, we have the greatest possible impact. And just for a second, this might be a little bit of inside baseball talk for a second, but the curriculum we use at X Church is actually called Orange. And that might sound, at least first glance, like a bizarre name for a curriculum, but there's actually a really cool reason why it's called Orange. And it's actually all about this idea that we're talking about right now. What they would say is that when you combine the love of a home, represented by red, like a heart, is combined with the yellow, the light of the church, you make orange. And orange is what is actually most effective in building a foundation of faith in the life of a child. And so, moms and dads, I want to remind you, you have the greatest potential for influence in your child's life in all areas, but especially when it comes to faith. And I say that because I think oftentimes maybe we have the idea that church works sort of like school. Like, oh, well, I drop my kid off at school and then they come home and now they know math, right? Or they know how to read. Church works like that to a point, meaning that the church's role is absolutely to help instill faith values into the life of a child. But the difference, maybe one of the biggest differences between school and church, is that they spend 6 to 7 hours a day at school, 5 days a week. If you come to church every single Sunday of the year, it's only about an hour long, and it only equates to around 50 to 52 hours a year. That is not enough to develop a foundation of faith in the life of a child, which is why we build best when we build together. And so part of my heart behind this podcast is to actually help us do just that. One element of this podcast that's going to happen monthly that I haven't discussed yet is I want to give you kind of a quick synopsis of everything that'll be happening in XKIDS for that month. So if you're watching this when this episode comes out, we are in the month of March of 2025, which sounds unreal that, first of all, it's 2025. That doesn't sound like a real year to me, but also that it's March already, and I swore we just had Christmas yesterday. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick synopsis, not just to inform you about what we're doing, but to enable you to begin having faith conversations around some of these topics. So again, so that the church and the home, we are working together to build a foundation of faith. And I also want to remind you that there are two things that have already been happening for a while. One, when you pick your kid up, depending on their age group, along with their craft or when they're waiting at the door, you are handed a little take-home piece of paper. And let me just tell you again, I know the reality of being a parent when they have just made, a beautiful piece of art that they're so excited, but maybe has some wet paint on it, or, is falling apart already because the glue hasn't dried, and you're also handed a little tiny piece of paper. I know that piece of paper gets lost by the time you make it to the car. I know it is, which is why we give it to you every single week. But what is on there, depending on their age group, is their monthly memory verse, And if they're a little older, we attach some maybe conversational guides to, again, not just to inform you of what we're doing, but to enable you to begin having some conversations at home so that we are working together. But I have started a new thing almost a year ago now called the Parent Resource Page. That is in the XChurch app. And so I want you to know everything I'm about to cover of what we're going to hit in the month of March in XKids can be found, plus a little extra, on the Parent Resource Page of the XChurch app. So if you have the app downloaded, you can hit the little church tab at the bottom that's marked by the little cross icon. The second block down from the top, right underneath the message notes, which I know is everybody's favorite part of the app, is the Parent Resource Page, which has the monthly rundown of everything we're going to hit in XKids. But just to give you kind of a quick overview, maybe a little bit deeper explanation of what is happening, let's jump into it. So in the month of March for Explorers and Heroes, which if you're not familiar with our age breakdowns, the Explorers age group is the 2 and 3-year-olds. And if you're thinking about colors, that's the orange in the yellow room. And in Heroes, that's 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. The green room and the tealish, light bluish color room, they do the same series. Their series this month is called Watch This, which is what this age group, both of them, 2 all the way to 5 years old, they say 37 times a day. Watch this, watch this, watch this. And as a parent, we kind of pretend to be amazed at them doing what they think is a cartwheel or what they think is a magic trick, right? We're kind of taking that this month and kind of turning it on its head, where we are encouraging kids to watch the one who can actually do anything. And his name is Jesus. And so we are going to be diving into some of Jesus's miracles. And we're kind of taking their very captive, imaginative mind and saying, hey, what we do when we imagine, how we do crazy things or we do things that aren't really possible in real life. Jesus did those things for real. And so we're jumping into some of his miracles, with the bottom line being what we are hoping to accomplish with this series is that kids walk away knowing that Jesus can do anything. And the memory verse that's going to go along with that is Luke 5:17. And the power of the Lord was with Jesus. And again, you can check out the Parent Resource Page for a few more simple conversation starters for each week of the month of March. Now, jumping into our elementary age groups, that's the Legends rooms, the purple room and the blue room. Our series is called Cast and Crew. Everyone has a part to play. This series is all about working together to accomplish something great. And in the Legends age groups, we teach a virtue each month. And this month's virtue is cooperation, as you might have guessed. Cooperation, and the definition that we are giving them that we're going to go over every single week in class. So again, this is another thing. You can ask them on the way home from church or Tuesday on the way to school to help us work together to cement these really important truths into their mind. But the definition we are giving them is working together to do more than you can do alone. And so we're going to be talking about all the different elements of cooperation throughout the Bible. You know how a body has many parts, but it is one thing. We're jumping into all of that with our elementary age kids this month with the memory verse, Ecclesiastes 4:9. 2 people are better than 1. They can help each other in everything they do. And again, all of this can be found on the Parent Resource Page, again, along with even a little extra, some conversation starters for each week. So, to recap our first episode of The Parent Path, you have, mom or dad, you have the greatest potential for influence in your child's life, but you are not the only influence your children need, which is why when it comes to building a foundation of faith in the life of a child, we build best when we build together. Thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing this podcast. If you've got a parent friend, even if they're not a part of the XChurch family, I'd love for you to share this with them. And again, if you have any thoughts or ideas or any topics you'd love to hear discussed on this podcast, you can send me an email anytime at jesse.mccoy@thex.church. And I also want to thank you for your work as a parent. Thank you for investing in becoming a better parent, because I really believe that when parents get better today, the world gets better tomorrow. Because again, the children we are raising today will, in not that long, I know it seems like a long way off, but not that long, will be tomorrow's doctors, teachers, world leaders. And so when we do a good job of raising them and instilling a foundation of faith in them at a young age, the world gets better tomorrow. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.